Hello, my name is Dave Zapponi. I'm the CEO of ECHO, otherwise known as the Educational Council of Homeowners. Thank you for participating in this live stream event, Breaking Up is Hard to Do, presented by John Clinny of the Association Consulting Group. We are happy to have you here. ECHO is a statewide nonprofit association established to support HOA board members and engaged homeowners. Our mission is to foster a better quality of life in community associations through education, advocacy, and connections. For today's event, we have a few housekeeping items. When hovering over the bottom of the screen, there are a few feature icons that are available to use during this webinar. Please use the chat feature for any technical issues you may have. The chat feature can also be used to interact with other attendees and ECHO staff. If you have questions for the speaker, please use the Q&A icon. We will answer questions during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We may answer some in writing during the presentation. Due to the number of participants, we likely will not be able to answer all the questions during the scheduled Q&A session. To help us select the most relevant questions of this audience, please use the thumbs up icon found in the Q&A feature window. Simply click on the icon to vote for your favorite questions. You may vote for more than one. Please keep your questions general in nature. Questions about specific situations in your community are likely better answered one-on-one. Also, please be courteous and respectful of webinar participants, including speakers and sponsors at all times. Any participant may be removed, blocked, or edited at the discretion of ECHO at any time and for any reason. Participants are solely responsible for their comments and actions. Except for sponsors, this program is not a marketing forum for professional service providers. This event is copyrighted by ECHO. We do not give permission to others to record the meeting in whole or in part. The program will be recorded. A copy of the recording, along with presentation slides, will be emailed to registered participants within 7 days of the program. Please join me in thanking our premier sponsors for today, the Kevin Boland Insurance Agency. We also thank our program sponsors, Heritage Bank of Commerce and HOMI. We will now hear a brief message from Lionel Soto of Heritage Bank. Lionel?
Good afternoon. My name is Lionel Soto, and I'm with Heritage Bank of Commerce. We are an HOA specialty bank. What that means is we have all the products and services to help your HOA or management company process all the work for that community. We have operating and reserve accounts. We have CD placement and sweep accounts. We also have loans. I'm happy to be here today for this interesting presentation. Please give us a call if you need any assistance with your banking needs.
We now will view two short videos from HOMI and the Kevin Boland Insurance Agency.
Managing an HOA is no easy feat. That's why we built HOMI. HOMI is the ultimate financial and operational planning tool for HOA board members. HOMI takes your reserve study data and brings it to life, allowing you to keep track of your building expenses and replacements, model different financial scenarios to better project the long-term health of your community, and turn your reserve study into actionable tasks, making it easier to execute for both board members and property managers. Sign up to get free early access to HOMI at homi.io.
Hi everyone, my name is Kevin Boland, and thank you so much for taking your valuable time today to listen and learn at an ECHO educational event. You know, I joined ECHO about 5 years ago, and I really learned a lot. My acceleration was amazing because I listened to so many professionals like we are today going to talk about their specialty, and I learned a lot of best practices. So I'm really glad you're here today, and it's really an honor for me to be a sponsor and to give back to the association that really helped me. And I'm a bit of an old school guy at heart. I love to read books, magazines, and newspapers besides webinars. And one of my favorite journals to read is the ECHO Journal. I know a lot of you are aware of this journal, but for those of you that don't, please check this out. There's a lot of really good, useful, and easy to read information and great tips on here. So to help us become better board members. So I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. I hope you learned a lot today. And of course, as always, if you have any insurance questions, you can always reach me at kevinbolandinsurance.com.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Homie. And thank you to all our sponsors. Heritage Bank has also provided us with a $50 Amazon e-gift card that will be raffled off at the end of today's seminar. Stick around to win. Finally, our disclaimer. None of what is said during the seminar shall be construed as specific legal advice from the speakers, sponsors, or ECHO. If you wish specific advice, we encourage you to contact your attorney. Now let's begin session number 1. Our webinar today is Breaking Up is Hard to Do, presented by John Clinny. John is a veteran certified portfolio manager and industry thought leader. As co-founder of Association Consulting Group, John advises and educates community association board members on a wide range of community management topics. He provides management and management company evaluations, reviews, and search activities. John is passionate about encouraging self-managed associations and board members to be effective and successful. He does this by consulting with HOA boards on best practices in community management, good community governance, and common sense approaches to compliance with federal, state, and local statutes. John, please begin.
Great. Thank you, David, and welcome everybody. We've already got some really good questions. And so I want to do just a little bit of quick background before we launch into our content material today. As David says, I spent years and years as a portfolio community manager and head of business development for my own management firm in the San Francisco Bay Area. And during that time, we obviously transitioned a number of associations, both not only into our management care, but also out of our management care as well. I have spent time as a consultant involved in management searches for management companies, executive directors, and general managers. And I'm hoping that some of this background will help you understand a little bit more about me and some of the best practices that I've learned to bring to successful transitioning. And that's what we're going to focus on today. I've also been a part of national, state, and local nonprofit board of directors, but I do want to tell you that I've never been a member of my own HOA board of directors. And so that's just a little bit about myself. We're going to be talking about 4 specific themes and one overarching kind of a concept when it comes to achieving success in community management transition. And those themes are talking about pre-breakup considerations. We're going to talk about breakup timing and negotiating tips. We're going to talk about achieving success in management transition and the importance of post-breakup reviews and takeaways. So let's take a look, and I've got some good news for you on our next slide. Breaking up doesn't have to be hard to do. Oftentimes, it can be a shock. In this economic age that we find ourselves in, post-pandemic, and even in, I guess we're still in the pandemic, and even in last year, there are a number of challenges and pressures that management companies have. And oftentimes you'll find that your management company is the one that has actually decided to separate from you and from your association. So breakups can go both ways. And while most of our discussion today is going to be on the community association and the board of directors that actually brings the breakup and initiates the breakup, please remember that these are transferable concepts that can be used either way. So if you find yourself in the situation where you've gotten a Dear John letter from your management company and they've given you 30 or 60 days to transition and find a new management company, the concepts and the tips that we're going to be talking about will work in that situation as well. So we want to be mindful of that. So breaking up doesn't have to be hard to do. And I want you to understand that business relationships and the relationship between the board of directors, the association, and the community management firm or executive director or manager or general manager is a business relationship. They're not unlike romantic relationships. The honeymoon phase passes and you may find yourself left with turbulence and disagreements. I don't care how great a relationship you've had, there will be a time when you find yourself in turbulent waters and you will have disagreements. So what are some signs that a breakup might be inevitable? And this would be coming from the perspective of the community association or the board of directors. And then we'll talk about a couple things that may come at from the management company. So some signs that a breakup may be inevitable are irresponsible behavior, a lack of honesty, a misalignment of visions, values, and expectations, an unwillingness to compromise, indifference, and something I call relationship or management fatigue. These can work both ways. And I do want to just take a second and put on my management company hat just for a minute and talk about some things that drive management companies to send separation letters or notices of termination to their clients. Some of those things have to do with the size of your association, and I'm sorry to say that, but because of the challenges that many management companies are having in acquiring and retaining talent and managers, there are some management companies that have said, you know, we really have to put a limit on how small an association we're willing to work with. And if you're a small homeowners association, you may find yourself on the receiving end of one of those letters because you are not large enough that it makes a lot of economic sense for the management company to manage your affairs. The other thing that drives a management company to send a termination letter may be a base management fee that has not changed over the years. And it could be that they just don't feel like there's enough profit margin for them to dispense the kind of services that your association might feel that they expect to have. The other thing is your association may fall into what I call a high-touch nightmare for a community management firm. There are some associations that haven't been proactive to work with their management companies about communication policies or different things that have to do with the management contract and expectations about that contract. And you can find yourself in a situation where your management company is perceiving that you're too high touch. There's too many interactions. And every time there's an interaction, maybe they feel badly about having to charge an extra fee for that or something, and they think it just makes more sense to end the relationship. So those are some signs that things may be breaking up and that you may be inevitably headed for a breakup. Let's go to our first poll question. And what I'd like you to do is take a second to read this over and to provide me with your responses. And we intentionally did this so you can only have one response, just so we can kind of get you to focus in a little bit on maybe some things that are happening in your own board of directors and in your own association. So if your board is considering a breakup with your manager or management company, what breakup signs are influencing your consideration? Irresponsible behavior, and we could call that too much risk that the management company might be taking, compliance issues, deadlines or follow through, lack of honesty, misalignment of visions, values, and expectations, an unwillingness to compromise, indifference, relationship or management fatigue, or maybe you're not looking to make a change at this time. What would you say is driving your consideration at this point?
Keep the poll open for about another 20 seconds, John.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, here we go.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Let's take just a quick run through here. Irresponsible behavior is leading at about 39% of those who responded. 22% are not looking for a change. That's great. And we're going to talk about some things that might actually help you make sure that you maintain that good relationship that you have. Looks like 17% of misalignment of visions, values, and expectations. And then we've got some other values. So by and large, it's irresponsible behavior that is motivating that, which could stem from too much risk taking or the management company not making sure you're in compliance or having trouble with that, missing deadlines, or we're not following through on projects according to your board's expectations. Well, let's talk about some pre-breakup considerations. I want you to think of the breakup or the transition to a new management company as a project management scenario. And I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. This is a large project. If you are considering making a change, or if you've gotten that letter of termination from your management company, you have embarked on what, for all intents and purposes, needs to be considered a project. There's going to be a beginning, there's going to be a middle, and there's going to be an end. And as we talk about these four elements in the transition process, I want you to reflect on it from a project management perspective. So let's talk about some pre-breakup considerations. And I do this because oftentimes the breakup is motivated, can be motivated on the side of the management firm or on the side of the board of directors by emotionally charged issues and misalignment of expectation, and what we call that as irresponsible behavior. We think it's irresponsible behavior. It may be, but typically it stems from that misalignment. So let's talk about three things, and then we're going to break these things down into their component parts. So regarding pre-breakup considerations, I want you to consider that you need, as a board of directors, to be intentional and unambiguous. This goes whether or not you've gotten the letter of termination from the management company or you are instigating the breakup as a board of directors. Number two, I want you to reflect on how to create a positive and a collaborative process to get through to the other side. And number three, I want you to consider how this process will allow the board of directors to consider and implement opportunities for improvement in governance. If you've heard me speak before at ECHO webinars or events or in any other settings, my passion is good governance. And if you're a member of your board of directors here today, governance is what you provide. And in that governance, you provide leadership. So let's take a look at intentionality and being unambiguous. Next slide, please, Connor. Thank you. So I'm asking you to be intentional and unambiguous in this process. First thing we want to do is you as a board of directors, whether or not you have instigated the breakup or you've received that termination letter, is you need to own the process and you need to own the decisions that you're going to make. More so if you're instigating it. But in the same way, you need to own the process and the decision-making if you get that notice of termination. Number two, it's very important that you keep your emotions in check. This can be a very emotional time. The breakup may have been motivated by what you consider irresponsible behavior that put the association at grave risk. And you may be very emotional about it. But this is not the time to be emotional as we work through the process of managing this transition. Number three, I want you to communicate clearly and early. And we're going to talk about how important that communication is. Clear communication is important. If you're instigating this breakup and you've got to the point where you're ready to issue your notice of non-renewal or notice of termination of the management contract to your management company or firm or general manager, you need to communicate clearly. And we want to communicate early. This is the kind of thing that can unhinge associations, that can create rumors, and you want to be able to contain the messaging. And then thirdly, I want you to remember to use project management techniques and best practices. This is a project, not unlike a roofing project, not unlike a project to restate your CCNRs or painting or siding repairs. Think of this as a project, and that will help you to keep emotions out of it, to be objective, and to work with the ends in mind. Let's look at the next slide on pre-breakup considerations. And I've got a little quote here from the Dalai Lama, one of my favorites. Remember that sometimes not getting what you want is a wonderful stroke of luck, right? You may have gotten to this process. You may have intentionally decided to go a different direction and to transition to new management. You may be disappointed by your management company. They may have not met your expectations, or you may be very disappointed that they've terminated you and felt that the association and the business relationship was great. But remember, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and you will move through this in a positive way. So we want to create a positive and collaborative process for this. And the first way we do that is we want to frame and manage our message, not only to our management firm, but also to our key stakeholders. We may need to reach out to our members. We may need to reach out to key service providers and let them know what's going on. We can do it through email. We can do it through first-class mail. We can do it through phone calls. We can do it through town hall meetings. We can do it through special meetings. We can do it through board meetings. One of the things that I don't like is oftentimes in framing and managing the message and considering types of communication, the board of directors will circle the wagons and use the executive session. And I want you to be very, very careful about that. As you know, there are only a number of very specific things that can happen in executive session. And it is true that the board can talk about contract provisions in executive session. But don't use that vehicle as an excuse because you're afraid to deal head on with questions from your membership or other people. I would much rather see you call to order a special meeting of the board of directors, or use the town hall approach to collect input from people, or to let them know what's transpiring and what you're doing about it. So framing and managing the message is important. Next, it's really important that we try for a win-win. This is not about the board winning or the management company winning or making the manager look bad. During this process, we want to try for a win-win. We want to be respectful. We want to take the high road. We want to consider the best interest of our association and our community members. Number 3, I want you to consider the governance requirements. Just because you're going through a management transition doesn't mean you can throw out California Civil Code with respect to how the association operates. You still need to follow your governing documents. You still need to follow the code. And it's very important that, like any other project, you make a list of governance requirements and how that's going to help you accomplish your goals. For just a second here, I want you to think about the benefit of an ad hoc committee. If you're a smaller association or even a large association who only meets every other month or meets quarterly, you may really have a challenge in pulling together additional meetings to confront the challenges of managing a management transition. And one of the ways that you can deal with those challenges is by commissioning a committee of the board of directors. And if you commission a committee of the board, and as long as you stay under a quorum of board members, let's say you have a board of 5 and you want to put 2 members on the committee and you want to have 3 members from the community to be a part of this management transition committee, then you can do business in a way that will allow you to expedite your decision making. And sometimes that can be very, very helpful. So don't think that your board of directors has to go this alone. You have some options to be compliant with governance requirements and still expedite the process. And I find that a lot of boards get twisted around the axle because they feel like every board member has to be involved and everybody's got to do it. And oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And how do we call all these meetings? And how do we meet the notice requirements? And there are some ways around that. And then lastly, you can engage your trusted advisors. Probably you've got CPAs, you've got attorneys, you have insurance agents, you have people that you can reach out to that can help you as a resource, not only for some of your search activities or search recommendations or suggestions, but that can also help you make considerations about the process. Let's talk about considering improvements in our governance process. Next slide, Colin. Thank you. So the last slide here on pre-breakup considerations. And I want you to remember that management is doing things right, but leadership is doing the right things. I've said it over and over again, governance is leadership. Being on a board of directors is managing the affairs of the association from a leadership perspective, not from the perspective of doing things. So one of the things that I want you to consider in this pre-breakup project management scenario is to be able to consider as a board of directors and to implement some opportunities for improvement in your governance, right? We talked about intentionality And we talked about being unambiguous about the process, own the process. Part of owning that process is to say, okay, how can we make sure that this doesn't happen in the future? Or what things can we do to improve our communication, to touch base more often? Those include the monitoring of the manager or the management company. Remember, boards of directors, you guys can hold a meeting without your manager present. There's nothing that says your manager has to be there. If you want to hold a meeting during the year or a special meeting where you talk about management expectations, you talk about the management company, feel free to do that. But the monitoring of the manager or management company, their processes, their contractual agreement with you should be a regular and periodic occurrence for your board of directors. One of the first things I often ask search clients is, when's the last time you did an evaluation of your management company? Now they're already down the road. They're talking to me because they're down the road. They've made a decision, hey, we're transitioning, or we got our letter of termination and we're going to start moving down the road and transitioning. Let's go find a new management firm. And I'll say, so when did you last have a sit down and an evaluation with your management company and talk about the management contract? Oh, we haven't done that. Have you read the management contract? No, we're not really, we kind of read it. We kind of know where it is, but no, we don't pay a lot of attention to that. So it's really important that you create a governance line item in your governance calendar that gives you time to monitor and evaluate whoever is managing the affairs of your association from a managing agent perspective. Number two, what I find real important and also really lacking in community association governance is the board's periodic surveying of their community. And I don't care if you've got a small community of 25 townhomes or a large community of 2,500 townhomes. Part of leadership is to assess your community members' preferences, perceptions, and expectations. And that can be about management, or about the manager, or about the management relationship. What are the community's perceptions? Oftentimes, boards are motivated to make changes in management because there are some noisy homeowners that dominate meeting space, time, and email inboxes complaining about managers or management companies. And that will motivate the board oftentimes to say, we just need to stop all this bad stuff. There must be something going on. So take time, include your community, survey your community as to what's important to them, and then move through your transition process with those expectations in mind. Now, I want to say one word about surveying the community. This is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, this is going to give you as a board of directors some real good data and feedback about your community. On the other hand, this, in a sense, will tell you community preferences, perceptions, and expectations that may have dollar signs attached to them. For instance, you may have selected the least expensive management firm the last time around, right? You didn't really put together a good scope of work. You called 5 or 6 different management companies and said, hey, can you give me a proposal for managing our community? Management company is left saying, okay, well, what's the scope of work? Oh, full service community management. That's the scope of work. And so the management company is left with having to figure out exactly what that means. So they will come back to you with a proposal, a list of all the things that they can do for you. And by and large, much of your decision making will be around the cost of that management and what you expect based on what you're reading in the proposal. That's not necessarily the right way to do it, right? You need to create that scope of work. You need to go to that prospective management company and say, here are our management expectations and requirements. What is it going to cost us to get that done so that our community members' expectations are met and our expectations are met? Next one, review and evaluate your governance board practices. When you find yourself getting a notice of termination, or when you find yourself instigating a separation from your current management company, put that against the backdrop of your own governance practices. How is the communication? How is the feedback? Do you acknowledge your manager as a trusted advisor? Do you need to think about reorientating your expectations as a board? Do you tend to micromanage? If you micromanage, why do you micromanage? Maybe it's because you're feeling that the manager or management company is being irresponsible and not meeting deadlines or following through on things. But we should have those discussions as a part of our regular governance practices. And then the last one that you should consider in a pre-breakup is the importance of the institutional knowledge of your community. Oftentimes, management companies are the sole source of community institutional knowledge. And it's important for you to say, where is our knowledge? Where's our knowledge database? You may be in a community that has board of directors elections every year. Maybe you're turning over, a third or a quarter or 2/3 of the board of directors every year. So continuity becomes very, very important. How are you going to make sure that you've warehoused that database of institutional knowledge? How often does our maintenance occur? What is the scope of work for the landscape maintenance company? What are all those things that the management company or manager does that are in a sense invisible that you need to capture? Let's talk about our next poll question. Poll question number 2. What pre-breakup consideration do you believe to be the most important? Once again, it's a single choice question. And I want you to think about the last 4 slides. Intentionality and being unambiguous, creating a positive and collaborative process through the transition, or considering and implementing opportunities for improvement in your governance practices.
Got about 20 more seconds for this question, John.
Yep, no problem. What would you consider to be the most important pre-breakup considerations?
Here you go.
Wow, I'm surprised. I would not have thought that consideration and implementing opportunities for improvement in governance practices would be 48%. That's great. That's great. I think there's a sense, a growing sense among community associations and boards of directors that compliance requirements and the to-do list of the association has really grown to a place where volunteer leadership really has a hard time getting their hands around it. And it's important that leadership, specifically, i.e., implementing opportunities for improvement in governance, really compel the work of the board of directors. If you haven't considered a governance calendar, and I'm talking about a governance calendar as separate from your operational annual calendar, if you have that, but an actual governance calendar where you talk about governance opportunities throughout the year and when you're going to do stuff from a governance perspective, and actually allow meeting space and opportunity, time during your meeting to do that, it's going to be a big improvement for your community association. All right, number 2, let's talk about breakup timing and negotiating tips. We're going to first focus on timing. And I love this quote, although it's anonymous, I couldn't peg it to anybody. Good timing is invisible. Bad timing sticks out a mile. Isn't that true? If your timing is good, everything just rolls right along. If it's off, everybody sees it, and it can create chaos and pandemonium. So how do we make this transition work? You've gotten your notice of termination. You've decided to begin a termination process with your management firm, manager, general manager. So where do we start? How do we make the timing work? Well, the first thing that you need to do operationally is to review your management contract, review your employment agreement, and specifically look at the termination and separation clauses in that agreement. What does it say? And in most cases, there will be very clear language about what kind of notice you need to provide and when you need to provide it. Once again, do you remember our pre-breakup considerations of getting our emotions out of the process and looking for a win-win? So now that you've gotten that notice of termination, or now that you started that termination process and you've made the proactive decision that you're going to change horses, you're going to go through this breakup, you got to review that management agreement or employment agreement. When do you need to provide notice? How much notice do you need to provide? And are there potential costs and fees involved in terminating the agreement? What might those be? And how will we pay for those if they manifest themselves? Most termination requirements nowadays are 60 days with or without cause. There are still some 30-day contracts out there, but by and large, it's 60 days, both on the part of the management company and for you as a board of directors or association breaking up. Now, maybe you've got an issue that you think is just so reckless that you think you've got really good cause to terminate the manager. I would still caution you, because timing is going to be critical, to make sure that you go through the process, you take care of your timing, you make sure that you can transition a new management company when you need to on your own terms. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. So the first thing you're going to do is review your management contract or employment agreement, review the termination clauses for notice of termination requirements. You will also get hints in there about the kind of language to use. For instance, maybe you've got a termination clause that's 60 days. So maybe you don't think you can find a new management company in 60 days. Maybe you think, doggone it, we want to do this process right. It's going to take more like 90 or 120 days. So maybe you need to say, look, we're going to take ownership of this. And what we're really saying, management company, is, hey, this is our notice of non-renewal and termination in fulfillment of your of your termination clause 5.2 in the November 15th, 1995 management agreement to be effective on such and such a date. Take ownership of that process. Don't feel compelled because the agreement says 60 days that you have to have everything wrapped up magically in 60 days. Next thing, consider your association's annual calendar and projects. I cannot tell you how important this is. If you have an election of directors coming up, or an election for a special assessment, or a membership vote on some items, that may really not be a very good time to go through a management transition. There may be too many compliance issues out there to consider a transition. You may be better off doing it before you get into some critical events and deadlines, or after critical events and deadlines, and make sure that your current management company handles those critical events and deadlines, even if you have to pay them more. I'm dead serious about this. Consider your current and pending projects. Remember, timing is everything. If you're in the middle of a large project or a time-sensitive project, maybe you have to get the pool replastered before you try to open the pool on Mother's Day. You may be better off once again saying, look, we've got some really critical projects going on that we are looking to management to help fulfill and complete for us, and we need to structure this so we get these done. Once again, the timing is critical. And then thirdly, you want to communicate your timing clearly to your management company in the notice of termination. Be clear. Here is our timing. Here is our expectations. Let's talk about negotiating tips. Really important that you understand that you can negotiate a management termination and transition. If you've gotten a termination letter from your management firm, you don't have to panic. You can say, hey, thank you. I get it. I understand you're terminating us. However, here's the timing that works for us. Negotiate that. You can negotiate timing and you can negotiate terms. You want to avoid a lame duck manager, management firm, or general manager. And the way you do that is you're clear about your transition expectations. You want to be clear about what your manager expectations are, your management company expectations are, or your general management expectations are. Couple of examples. Maybe you inevitably had to start a transition, and oh, by the way, you're going to send your notice of termination to the management company 5 days before they start your board of directors election process. Well, you certainly want to be clear in that transition, in that notice of termination, that, oh, by the way, management company, our expectations are that you will administer the election process and coordinate with the election inspector on our upcoming board of directors election. Or be clear that you have these projects pending and you expect them to continue progress payments. You expect them to continue monitoring the project or collecting bids, administrating the project, whatever that is. Be very, very clear about your expectations. The last thing you want is for your management company to receive a notice of termination and become a lame duck, or have an excuse to become a lame duck, or to put your association on the back burner. You want to make sure that your expectations are in writing. And I know this is going to drive many of you nuts, but you may need to consider incentives. Management continuity is important. You still need to have assessments collected. You still need to have bills paid. You still need to have your assessment collection policy implemented. You've still got a budget to draft, prepare, and distribute. You've still got reserve studies to do, ongoing maintenance. Everything doesn't just stop until your new management company shows up on the scene. So negotiate everything in that transition. The only way you can do that is to have the information that you need. Let's talk about achieving success in the management transition process. So the bottom line is we want to have a successful transition. Whether we've gotten the notice of termination or we've instigated the termination, we've submitted the notice of termination, we've been clear about our expectations and our timelines. And now we want to start that transition to a new management firm, allowing them the time they need to onboard your association in the best way possible without fire drills. I can't tell you how many times I've heard associations say, well, how quick can you start to a management company? Most smart management companies will say, look, we need 30 or 45 days for a real successful transition. They want your new manager, management company, general manager wants to be successful. They don't want to all of a sudden have a fire drill because you did not plan correctly and now the wheels are coming off. They want a successful transition. They want time to onboard you, to set up their back office systems, to develop their policies, their letters, their templates, input your members, get everything going. And it's important that you have a meaningful conversation about what that will take. So how do we do that? You may need to streamline your governance requirements. You may need to dedicate a committee to searching for a new management firm, surveying the community, putting together bid specifications, scope of work, collecting proposals. You may need to consider allotting board meeting time to discuss the process. You may need to think about putting together some special meetings so that you can expedite processes that demand board of directors votes and consideration. You may need to plan some executive sessions so that you can weigh different proposals or talk about proprietary information in a confidential manner. That's okay. But all of these things, except potentially committee meetings, have notice and agenda requirements for your membership. And you have to be careful of that. You can't throw out those requirements because you happen to be in the middle of a transition. You need to start your search for a successor manager or management company early in the process. Once your board has made a decision that you are going to transition, that you're going to write and send that notice of termination, or once you've received a notice of termination from your management company, you need to start the search immediately for a successor manager or management firm. You need to huddle up. You need to decide on that project team. You need to decide on the scope of work. You need to decide on what management companies you're going to approach that you think have the best fit for you. You're going to need to think about what you need to do to get an early start on that process and how it's going to fit into those governance requirements. You may need to pre-schedule some board meetings or special meetings or executive sessions and have those queued up and ready to go. You need to have a plan for effective and timely communication with your community members. How are you going to roll this out? How are you going to control the message to your members that you have decided to go another direction, terminate your current management company, initiate a search for a new management firm, and transfer to a new management company? And what does that mean for them? Very important. And you need to have an effective and timely communication plan for your key vendors and service providers. Doesn't mean you're going to throw everybody out with a management firm. You may have a landscape company or a janitorial firm or a security firm, pool maintenance provider, attorneys, CPAs, insurance agents that you really gel with, you really work well with, and you want them to remain on your management team, even though you're changing management companies or managers. And you need to make sure you're communicating to them as well. And then I would say, don't be bashful about using a Gantt chart or other planning and scheduling tool. As I said, you need to consider this transition, this breakup, as a project, right? Pull the emotions out, be objective, think of it as a project, beginning, middle, and end. Create a chart, use planning and scheduling tools, use action items, keep everything on schedule to get to your endpoint. And this is really, really important. You might want to schedule updates to your community as to how it's going. You might want to schedule when you're going to get the scope of work done, or when you're going to get the survey of your membership done. You might want to schedule when proposals are due back by, or how you're going to review and select finalists to interview or to talk to in more depth. Those are complex things that you as a board of directors need to allot time for. And don't be bashful about using a charting tool or a planning and scheduling tool to help you through that process. All right, let's go to a third poll question, and then we're going to wrap up and get to some Q&A. And the third poll question is, what concerns you the most when thinking about breaking up with your manager or management company? What concerns you the most? Is it writing the notice of termination? Is it managing the termination timing and process? Searching for a new manager or management company? Getting management activities and projects on schedule and completed during the transition? Or the potential loss of institutional knowledge about your community? What concerns you the most when thinking about breaking up with your manager or management company? I'm going to allow you a little bit more time to consider that.
John, I'm going to ask everyone to take a look at the Q&A feature as well, to put their questions in there now and to vote with the thumbs ups and icon there so that we can get ready for the session.
Great. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Okay, John, your results are on the screen.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. So 35% of respondents said searching for a new manager or management company. Okay. That's understandable. You don't want to make a mistake, right? You want to make sure that you've done it in a comprehensive, complete fashion, and that's important. 29% said the potential loss of institutional knowledge. You know, I think that is in the background of a lot of board members' minds. Oh my gosh, our manager knows everything about us. Where are our records, right? Where is the database that houses all of our information? Where are our minutes? Where are governing documents? Where are policies? Where are templates? Where are drafts? Now, I will tell you that management companies, in trying to discover some secret sauce that separates them from their peers, will oftentimes create really, their own material, right, that they allow your association to use, and it's proprietary material. And there's a lot of question marks about whether or not they need to release that proprietary material, or whether their best practices or templates get out in the wild and end up being used by other management firms. So, these are all things that you need to be careful of, but institutional knowledge is a big deal. And then 20% of the respondents were concerned about ongoing activities that are taking place. Back to my point of timing and negotiating, right? We want to be careful in our timing. We want to be diligent in our negotiating. All right, let's talk about our last item before we go to Q&A. And our last item is the post-breakup review and takeaways. And Connor, if you can close out that poll question, that'd be great. Thank you. And this is what you would do with a project, right? You would do a post-project review, evaluation, and debriefing, or I would hope you would. And when you move through a transition and hire a new management company, whether or not you got a notice of termination, or you instigated that termination, or you hire a new general manager or executive director, you want to review and you want to do some takeaways that add to your institutional knowledge of good governance as a board of directors. So what's the importance of an objective review? Number one, did you as a board of directors accomplish your goals? Was it orderly? Did you keep the emotions out? Did you plan well? Did you time it correctly? Did you treat all the stakeholders with respect? Did you communicate effectively and timely? And what processes could you improve for next time? Now, remember, these are going to apply to all projects. So you may find some transferability in what you discover about yourself, about your leadership, and about your governance as a board of directors. Then second of all, the importance of takeaways. And these are questions that you should routinely ask yourself as a board of directors. What did we learn about ourselves through the process? What did you learn as a board of directors? What did you learn about yourselves? How did you handle the additional stress and challenges of this transition? What did you learn, or what did we learn about our board of directors? Through this process, what did we learn about how we function? About how we make decisions, about how we deliberate, about how we manage these projects? What did we learn about our process that we can pass along to future boards? What did we learn about our community? Maybe when you surveyed the community about their management preferences, perceptions, and expectations, you recognize that you as a board of directors were out of step and misaligned with your community. That's not unusual. Maybe you discovered that, oh my gosh, I didn't know our community felt this way. We have to realign our strategic vision for our association based on our community members. So what did we learn about our community? And how does that translate to dollar allocation in our budgets, our reserve studies, our assessments? And lastly, how can we better manage our relationship with our manager or management company? Through this process, what policies, what procedures, what can we put in place as a board of directors that would be transferable to other boards that will help us to better manage our relationship? So that if we see these signs, we can address them early on before they lead to what might be an unnecessary breakup. All right. Well, I'm excited to get some questions. Dave, I see we got about 27 questions out there, and we can certainly get to as many as we can in any way that you want to format that, Dave.
Okay, so let's go ahead and use the thumbs up button. We'll give you a few seconds here to do that, to vote for your favorite question if you haven't already done that. What I'd like to do is ask John just a quick question about sort of who's responsible for the management company, because there are a number of questions here where an HOA member is saying, I want to, how do I talk to the manager to get them to do what I want them to do? How do I talk to the board? So who's responsible? What's the pecking order in terms of governance, generally speaking?
You're talking about board to management company, or the hierarchy at the management company?
No, at the board to management company. Who in the community manages the board, the contract with the manager?
It's the board of directors. So there's some what I would call ambiguous language, misleading language in most of your governing documents. Most of your governing documents will say that the board of directors has the responsibility to manage the affairs of the association. Now, that's true. The board of directors does have the responsibility of managing the affairs of the association. But that language can be misconstrued, and board members often feel that gives them the right to take on management roles and responsibilities rather than governance and leadership roles and responsibilities. So, to Dave's question, who manages the relationship, who manages the contract? It's the board of directors. The management contract or agreement and any addendums or changes should be part of your board member information packet, right? You should have access to that management agreement, management contract, any addendums, any changes since day one, and it should be right there where you can refer to it. Because your job as a board is to manage the management company, its oversight, its leadership. And when we, as leaders, create expectations, reasonable expectations, which you will need to negotiate with your management company or manager, you will then hold them accountable for meeting those expectations. And you will have a give and take occasionally about what you mean by enforcement of the governing documents, right? You will have give and take about whether or not they're meeting those expectations, but it's the job of the board of directors to manage that relationship.
So if a homeowner is disappointed with the manager and the management of a community, who should they go to?
They need to go to the board. They need to go to the board of directors.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
so you should have, and Dave, to further reflect on that, right? Mm-hmm. Boards of directors need to have communication protocols, because your members may not feel comfortable going to the manager if they have a complaint about the manager. Right. For the most part, boards are going to say, hey, don't email us, go through the manager, which can create some conflicts and some uncomfortable awkwardness if members have real legitimate concerns, maybe about their treatment or about something else. And so boards, if you haven't created a communication protocol, you may want to do that. And maybe you designate one board member to receive member emails of a certain nature. And you monitor that in a way that you can effectively deal with it.
I presume, a push comes to shove, you could always attend a board meeting in the open session and talk.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, so let's go to the questions. I'm going to ask that you don't use the thumbs up now, because it moves the questions around and I have to track them down. for right now, and we'll open it up a little later if we have time. We have quite a few questions. The first one here is from Meg Best, and it's got 18 thumbs up. So if you change management companies, how difficult is it to transition the financial aspects such as dues collections, financial reporting, and actual banking if the bank changes?
Great question, Meg. And this all depends on whether you've got your timing right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you've allotted an appropriate amount of time, your professional management company, notice I used the word professional management company because I think there are some less scrupulous management firms out there than others. Your management company will be able to effectively transition those activities very easily. It's what they do. It's what they're trained to do. And most management companies will actually have team members that focus on the effective and timely transition of new clients that they've acquired over time. So this Meg should not be a hassle. You are correct. Management companies do oftentimes have banking relationships, and so there may be changes in your primary operating account and reserve accounts. But transitioning the financial activities is not a hard task for a professional management firm as long as they've been given an appropriate amount of time to do that.
Yeah, and you mentioned a professional management firm, and I'm going to point people to Business and Professions Code, and there's
Great.
Associations out there that you see all the insignia under John's title there on the page. Those people, those associations do have ethics, and each person that is a manager in the industry and has those certifications complies with those ethics, including being able to get the financial transactions, or the financial records transferred to the management company seamlessly. So there is a recourse there. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, John, but
and Meg, the follow-on to that is the cooperation of your current of the terminating the management company you've terminated, right? Management companies have ways of dealing with it. They do it every day. But it does take the cooperation of the management company that's been terminated or has terminated you. And as Dave said, there are ethical requirements around the handoff of records. So you've got some protections there, but
well, just make sure that you have a certified manager. That's
very important.
Bottom line, it's very important. Second question again from Meg with 16 thumbs up votes. Meg, you asked good questions. Basically, how often should a management company be changed? And she's heard 3 to 4 years. What's your thought on that, John?
My thought on that is that if you're asking that question, and Meg, this is not a reflection on you because I see this all the time, but it's because you don't have a systematic and periodic procedure and policy on evaluating and reviewing your management firm. There is some default information out there that says, hey, you know what? We can't trust these guys. They're out for their own good. They're always going to try to work the system. And so the only way we can keep them on track is to turn them over every 3 to 4 years. And that's not a best practice. It may be a best practice for your CPA, or some other things where you really need to have some due diligence involved, but it's not necessarily a best practice for your management firm. There are some very, very good management companies out there that have had clients for years and years and years and years and years that have been able to build up great relationships with their client communities. And they should not necessarily be kicked to the curb just because, hey, it's 3 to 4 years and we need to turn over our management company. Good transitions take time. And I would submit to you that even the best transitions have some pain for the community. And this is my opinion, Meg. It's not written in stone anywhere. But my opinion is that if you have created a real good, regular, periodic review and evaluation, that it's going to be less likely that you are just changing management companies because you feel like things have kind of gotten out of hand and it's time to make a change.
Mhm. Okay, the next question is from an anonymous attendee, and it asks the questions about how can they communicate complaints based on, since the communication protocols to the management firm. John, I think, answered that question. You got to have a different set of protocols so that you can go directly to the board.
Yeah.
And you can always do that in the open session in the meetings. Your board should have an open period for everyone to be able to talk. Any member in the community should be able to talk.
Right.
How do we handle transition of managers? And we've seen this more and more, John, where new managers coming in regularly, every few months, they get a new manager in the community. This one has had 5 managers since January.
Yeah. Well, anonymous, that's really unfortunate. And I'm sorry to hear about that for your board and your community. This has become much more endemic recently because of some of the challenges around, as I said, recruiting and training and retaining good management personnel. And management companies are in an absolute battle right now to shore up their ranks. And they are always a bit on the bleeding edge, right? It's not like they have managers sitting around waiting for a new client. Oftentimes, management companies are right on the bleeding edge of balancing their employee workloads with their new client acquisition. So it's really unfortunate. I've heard this complaint. You need to make sure that you have an open and honest line of communication to the principals or supervisors of your management company, that you're checking in with them regularly about how they're deciding on who they're assigning to your community and why they're assigning to your community. I'd be interested, Anonymous, if you have a small association or you feel like you're being, kind of kicked to the side because they are making sure that they are favoring larger, more profitable clients with a larger base management fee that they feel like they're better suited for. So if you've had 5 managers since January, you need to have a really open, honest conversation and think about transitioning to a different management firm.
Okay. So here's a question from Guido. Hi, Guido. Nice to have you back. I understand there's a situation where they want to call a town hall. So, John, we'll talk about town halls and calling town halls. Now, if you are a member at large in the community and not on the board of directors, you can go ahead and have a town hall yourself if you want to go ahead and do that. It's called a party, and you get people together and you talk about it. So there's nothing that's going to forbid you from that. So let's talk about how the board should do that and pull a town hall meeting. What can they do? What can't they do? How do they go about the noticing on that? I think we've had several people ask questions about that. So go ahead.
Yeah, Guido, it's a great question. I personally love the concept of the town hall meeting because I feel like it provides some real flexibility to the board of directors to hear from their members. And it's very, very simple. The town hall meetings is not a board meeting. By virtue of the fact that board members are part of the audience, right? They're part of the membership attending the town hall. And you may want to solicit a moderator or a facilitator. Maybe it's the board president, maybe it's the community manager, maybe it's an informed community member that can do the job. And essentially what you're going to do is say, hey, members, and you can post a notice that basically says, hey, we're going to have a town hall meeting to discuss our expectations around community landscaping requirements. Big deal. 6 o'clock at the clubhouse. And we're trying to solicit input from our membership. And board, you are not going to put your tables up in front of the room. You are not going to sit up in front of the room. You are going to be part of the audience, and your single moderator or facilitator is just going to simply welcome everybody to the town hall meeting and say, hey, let's talk about this a little bit. We had some complaints about the landscaping. As you know, it's a big part of our budget, and we're trying to just figure out what our community expectations are. And we'd like you to share with us a little bit what your expectations are. Maybe you have a whiteboard, maybe you have a PowerPoint you can run through. Maybe you take them through this. So it can be a powerful concept. It's not a board meeting. You're not conducting board minutes. You're not taking minutes. You may have somebody that takes some notes for the board to examine later. But it is really an open forum to simply discuss a single item of interest to the community. And like I said, I think it's a very effective tool.
So John, the board members can attend. I mean,
Absolutely.
You could have
They're members of the community, but they are
Right.
not putting on their board hat, and they're not going up front, and they're not pontificating to the membership about things.
Yeah.
The
And
best town hall meetings are silent board members that are listening to the input from their community.
And that's great. And and make sure they don't make any decisions through there.
No, absolutely
It's
not.
really, really critical that they remember that. We have quite a few questions, John. If do you have a couple minutes longer?
Yeah.
Okay. So we might go a little bit longer here to take some of these. We have let's go back to Anonymous. If you made the decision to change companies, how far into the process do you go with any new management company before informing them about the present company?
Yeah, great question. And this goes back to your timing and the requirements that your present company has in their termination clause in the management contract, right? So, I mean, you don't want to get too far down the process. It's okay to form a committee. It's okay to say, hey, we're right on the edge of making a decision to terminate our management agreement. We want to start the process of soliciting input from the community or working on a scope of work. That's fine. But you want to make sure that you address this timing properly. So if you think you can wrap the process up in 60 days and you've got a 60-day notice of termination, you may want to be proactive and get that notice of termination out. If you think the process is going to take 90 and it's really important for you to let the management company know so that they have a heads up and they can make sure, right, if you're working on this win-win, they've got projects, they've got critical timelines, you want them to be on your side if you can do it. If you can't do it and you've had an antagonistic relationship, or you are thinking and you have very real evidence that they are just going to absolutely run for the hills, then yes, you're going to want to manage that process a lot closer, get much closer to the decision-making on the new company and submit your notice of termination. So it's very, very critical. And these are some of the pre-breakup considerations that you're going to talk about. To make sure that you've got that dialed in.
Yeah, and Anonymous, she or he has a lot of really good questions here, and a lot of questions. If you choose a full service management company versus a dedicated HOA management company, do you have the contract? Do you have to use the contractors that are offered by the full service contractor, or I should say, a management firm?
Well, so a lot of management companies now have decided that because vendor compliance is so important, right? Insurance, risk management, that they go to great lengths to make sure that they've got what they call pre-vetted vendors. That makes it a lot easier for them to use because they've already done all the back office work to make sure they have proper insurance, they have the proper qualifications, licenses, whatever. However, that should never preclude the association from providing suggestions for vendors that they like. Now, there's a caveat to this. And Anonymous, if your association has been using handyman services or unlicensed services or vendors that don't have proper insurance, I would bet you dollars to donuts that your new management firm is either going to get them into compliance or they're going to kick them to the curb, because the management company is going to share some of that liability with you, and they are not going to allow, and I use that word specifically, you to engage a service provider or contractor that does not have the proper licensing or insurance. So the answer is yes, you should be able to select some of your own vendors or suggest your own vendors, but you're going to want to make sure that you're not taking any shortcuts because of pricing or anything else.
Yeah, and you also want to check your contract with your management firm to make sure that there's not
That they're not prohibiting it. That's right.
There's something specific in there that they manage. Okay, here's another one from Anonymous. What can we do when we have a board, two members of a board that are being obstructionists, basically? You've decided to move to a new management firm, but they are unwilling to make time to even interview the few management companies on the short list. What do you do? That's a political.
Short answer, you create an executive committee of the board and you exclude those two board members. So it's not difficult. Feel free to call your attorney and say, how do we do it? But you've hit a magic situation. If you've got a board of 5 and you've got 2 that are obstructionists, just simply exclude them. Just create an executive committee of the board of the other 3 and go about your business.
Okay, and so we'll take the last one here. What if your board won't consider changing management companies because they think all management companies deliver bad service and it's not worth the effort despite known issues?
I would say elect board members that understand the importance of good management.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think that's a really good sound advice. Ultimately, the homeowners actually have all the power in this process, and the homeowners' job is to pick good qualified representatives that are on the board of directors, and then the board of directors, if they're doing their jobs right or have their ear attuned to the sound of the community, and they hire people that fit the manager, that fit the association, then they're hiring a contractor. A management firm is nothing more than a contractor, as is, although the critical contractor, just like you would hire a paver or a roofer or someone else. So their job is to make sure things are executed properly.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so thank you, John.